What's happening, everyone? Hey, welcome back to another Adventure Box podcast. Just so you know, I'm getting over a cold. It happened over the weekend, and I've been going through this. I might be coughing during this session, especially if my voice gets dried out. So I have my water with me. I am ready to go. So here we go. First off, thanks again to Historical Conquest for sponsoring this podcast and also our YouTube channel. That is the Adventure Box podcast through Historical Conquest. This is a game where you can play and just have fun, but while you're playing, you're actually playing with cards of actual people from history and events and documents and technology and all these other things. Trying to take over the world or bring world peace, you get to decide, but there's a lot of strategy to it. There's a lot of intrigue. There's a lot of backstabbing when it comes to creating treaties and breaking them and such. It's a lot of fun. So go ahead and try that. Also, let's get into what we've been talking about. Now, if you remember last week, I told you that this week we're going to start talking about the French and Indian War. But we're not going to start about that today. Why? Because it did not actually start. The French and Indian War itself, also known as the Seven Years' War, did not start with the French and Indian War. It did not start with the 7 Years' War. It actually started back a few years before. Now, what actually happened during that time? So, in 1740, there was a person by the name of Emperor Charles VI. Now, Emperor Charles VI was of Austria. That's what he was. The emperor over basically the area of like the Byzantine Empire, which was all basically falling apart at this point. But he was over Europe. There's a lot of power that was given to this one person. And so this was what we call the War of Austrian Succession. And this is what it will be caused. But here's where it begins. And I'll tell you why we're talking about this before going into the French and Indian War, because it is essential to understand before we go further. Okay. So, in 1740, what happens? Emperor Charles VI dies. Now, he leaves the kingdom to his daughter, Maria Theresa. So she is the heir. She is supposed to be the one that's taking over not just Austria, but this larger swath of ruling over Europe. And it was her inheritance. This was secured by Charles to give her this ability. Now let me show you this. Oops, I already have this up. I don't know why I'm trying to open up another page. There we go, close that. There we go. That's Charles. Now, what's interesting about him is he's not just the Emperor Charles. He is also known as the Archduke. What is the Archduke and why is that important? Well, do you remember World War I? World War I supposedly was begun because of something. What was we call this the linchpin. This is the thing that started it all. This started one thing, led to another thing, which led to another thing, and ongoing. And so that's why we're talking about King Charles, Emperor Charles the Sixth. Sorry, not just any Emperor Charles, but the sixth one. We're talking about him because he was the linchpin. In World War I, Archduke Ferdinand was the one that was assassinated, and because he was assassinated, it led into World War I. But interesting enough, that was not actually the First World War. That's right. The First World War actually happened well before it. It is known to you, and by most people, by the 7 Years' War. Why is this different? The 7 Years' War was the first war around the world. Now, there's things like the War of Secession, of Austrian Secession, which was a large swath of the world, but it was not the world. It all stayed within Europe. And this is where, again, they were fighting over who was to succeed Charles. Now, the reason why World War I is given that credit for being the First World War is because it was over the whole world. United States got in there. Canada got in there. People from Asia, all over Europe, even down into some parts of Africa as well. All were part of World War One. But that was not the only thing. What happened before that? What was the actual First World War? The French and Indian War, which actually was not the French and Indian War. That was over in here in the United States. But what was the actual first war? And this is one that you can tell your parents. This is one that you can tell your friends. This is not ever talked about as the First World War unless you're a historian. Historians are the ones that say this all the time, but it was not actually classified as the First World War. It was the 7 Years' War. Now, the French and Indian War is basically the 7 Years' War in the Americas, but being in North America, actually. But it was not the only war going on at the same time, all linked together. See, again, let's go back to this, and then we'll get into the French and Indian War and why that became such a thing. Okay, so Charles dies. What happens? He dies. His succession, his kingdom was taken over by Maria Theresa. Actually makes me think of, I always think of it. Every time I say her name, I think of Mother Teresa. She was not the Mother Teresa. But Maria Theresa was a very pragmatic person. She was a person that was very outgoing and also very opinionated and truly believed that she was the one that was supposed to retain ownership and the rights to what? The rule, the major power in Europe, again, not over a certain point, and Austria, the actual country. So, December 1740, Frederick II. Now, why should you know this? Frederick the Great. Why should you know his name? Because he's the one that tried to take away Maria Theresa's country. He tried to take over Austria. So he invades a portion which is called Silesia. Silesia? Something like that. Beginning the First Silesian War. And then he challenged Maria Theresa to the rights to rule this area. Because this was, and you could actually say this is almost like what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. Russia has a lot of influence in Ukraine. A lot of the people from Russia have moved out of Russia, I wonder why, to take over parts of Austria. Well, interesting enough, just like that, Prussia had a lot of influence in Silesia. And so Prussia tried to take over Silesia, and that just spurred a lot more of a battle. So what's interesting, and if you know anything about battling back in Europe, and you probably do, you probably already know this, but everything was in lines. They marched together in lines. They fought together in lines. The front line bowed down and shot, while the ones behind them shot overhead. There was a lot of reasonings to do this. There's a lot of protection. The problem is the first person in line was most likely the person that was going to get shot, whether it was by an arrow early on or whether it was by bullets. So, by this point, you have a lot of fighting that's going on in Europe. Everyone's trying to take over other lands. They're trying to conquer other lands. It wasn't just in the Americas. While there was a lot of conquering and trying to take over lands in the Americas, it was also happening in Europe. It was happening in Africa, Asia. All these places were all doing these things. And again, it wasn't anything that they had started. It started well before, going all the way back to like Egypt, Mesopotamia. All of these countries, all these nations wanted to take over other nations. Luckily, in the United States, in modern times, not the United States, modern times, we don't usually have this. Russia and Ukraine, that is one of the oddball events. But when was the last time that we actually had in Europe or in the Americas, did we have someone trying to take over a country? That didn't really happen. Even Africa, most of the countries are set. They are distinguished by the UN and such, and by dictates of all the countries altogether. Now, Asia actually has a lot, especially when it comes to China. China has been trying to take over land forever, and they have not started. They've got Myanmar, they have Tibet, they have a lot of different places. And now that they know that they can't really expand their land, they've actually tried to expand their influence, putting other countries under debt, to create infrastructure and then taking over that country in the sense of ruling it. So not in the sense of they own the country, but they own the people that are running those countries. So we have all these different peoples doing these things still to this day. So let's go back to, again, this war, the War of Secession. Okay, so what happened during this war? You have two different people. You have supporters of the Pragmatic Sanction, which is basically Maria Theresa. These are the countries that fight together. As you can see, you have the Dutch, the British, Irish, Wales, Scotland. You have Austria. You have all of these others. So Silesia is right up here. It's the northern part of the Austrian territory. But in opposition, you have Prussia, which is not Russia. It is Prussia. Prussia tries to come down and take over Silesia. You have Saxony. Bavaria. All these actually tried to get into Austria, in the land that they have settled and own to some extent. But you also have France and Spain. All these go on the side of the opposition, basically side with Prussia. British against the French. As I said, there's a linchpin in all things. So you've got Austria fighting for its territory. You have Prussia trying to take over parts of Austria. And you've got the two biggest supporters of these. Well, you have Spain also, but France and Great Britain. So the war actually started up around 1741. The actual, December of 1740. 1741, it basically starts to really take off. So you have France and Bavaria form an alliance to oppose Austria. And basically they support those that are in the opposition. And that's around June 11th, 1741. Now all these different things happen. They're all gaining different supports from all over Europe. All those that are in the tan, if you can see this, if you're looking at our YouTube channel, are neutral. Switzerland, always neutral. They never really side with anyone. Parts of Italy. Now, it's not actually Italy at the time. This is still a broken up civilization thanks to the fall of Rome. And so Naples actually sides with the opposition that want to take over Austria and such. So there's all this different handling of alliances. Maria Theresa reached out to the British. They wanted to have this this alliance. At the same time, the French sided with Prussia. They were all siding with all different ones. 1742, what happened? Charles Albert is elected to the Holy Roman Emperor. Now, he's made Holy Roman Emperor Charles VII. So, the Holy Roman Empire that was part of Charles VI and supposed to be Maria Theresa's reign was now given over to Charles Albert. Now, just so you know, Charles Albert is actually of Bavaria. Bavaria is right here. So he is given control over the Holy Roman Empire. And this is when the Treaty of Breslau is written, ending the First Silesian War. Silesian War. Now, this is where Austria basically succeeds most of Silesia to Prussia. Maria Theresa can't withstand the pressures from Prussia. She says, I'm done. I can't do it. Take it. It's yours. But this also creates additional struggles for Austria, such as the Battle of Dettingen, which occurred in Bavaria. Now, British, Austrian, and other forces defeat the French in this battle. So it's in Bavaria but they have all these people coming in. But you have the French in there to help the Bavarians, again, controlled by the Holy Roman Empire, which is a lot part of France and Spain. Also Portugal, but Portugal stays out of this. They're far away. They don't care about this. They're not part of it. And so, yes, this happens. This marks the last time a British monarch, Charles George II, personally leads troops into battle. He's done. They're done at this point. But he does lead them into battle. Maria Theresa is crowned Queen of Bohemia, which this is, right here, Bohemia. It was not actually part of Austria. It was a territory that was consolidatory to it, but they did not hold it. So they consolidate her power and her hold over the territory. Again, fighting against Bavaria, because he's now been named, Albert, again, Charles the Seventh, has now been named the Holy Roman Emperor. And so Austria is not that happy that she did not get that Holy Roman Emperor title. And Bavaria is saying, hey, I'm the Holy Roman Empire, so you've got to bow to me. Because a lot of Europe was part of the Holy Roman Empire. And I only say holy because that's the title of it. So, the Roman Empire. Okay. And it's different than the Roman Empire because this is actually different. This is after Christianity was accepted by Constantine and such. So it became not just the Roman Empire, but the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, 1745. What happens? January 20th. Emperor Charles VII dies. Another one bites the dust. Another Charles bites the dust. Maximilian III, Joseph, makes peace with Maria Theresa, weakening France's alliance. He wanted the treaty because Charles the Eighth just died, or Seventh just died. This creates the Treaty of Fusen. F-U with the dots above it. S-S-E-N. So restoring Maximilian's land in Bavaria. So he actually gets his land back because Maria Theresa was actually kicking his butt and the French's butt, thanks to the help of the Great Britain's butt. They were in there. Okay, so and this also creates a second one where the treaty. This is actually in December. So the first one was in May. By December, you have the Treaty of Dresden. So the Treaty of Dresden ends the Second Silesian War. Prussia retains Silesia, basically all of it. And Maria Theresa's husband, Francis I, is accepted as the what? The Holy Roman Empire Emperor. So yes, now Austria takes over the Holy Roman Emperor again, emperorship again, and things should go back to normal, right? Well, not so much. 1746. What happens? The next one. The next battle. Battle of Piacenza. Piacenza? Something like that. This is where Austria and Sardinian forces. Sardinian. Where in the world is Sardinian? I don't know. Okay. So Austria and other forces that help defeat the French, or the Spanish and the French in northern Italy, disputing the French and the Spanish influence in that region. So, would it be Savoy? No. I don't know. We'll have to find that one out. Okay. So, again, Austria, still strong, still the Holy Roman Emperor. Sorry, Francis I, Holy Roman Emperor, kicks the butt of the French troops and the Spanish troops. And that's it for 1746. 1747 comes around. Another battle. Battle of Lauffeld. Lauffeld. Yes. Again, I get very, very sick throats. So, French forces, led by Marshal Maurice de Saxe, defeat the British and their allies in the lower countries, which strengthened France's opposition to the Netherlands. So we're coming back up here, into this area. Austrian Netherlands. Whoa, wait a second. The Austrian Netherlands. Didn't know about that place, did you? You got the Netherlands up here, but not the Austrian Netherlands. Cool. Okay. So, new battle. French takes over, grows France, and things seem to die down, right? That was October 11th of 1747. 1748, what happened? Another battle? No. This one is actually another treaty. How many treaties do they have to write just to bring peace to Europe? Peace out. Again, remember, this is like 8 years. In 8 years, they have like multiple wars, multiple treaties, and no one's keeping to them. Or maybe these treaties are, and we're not going over this because this is the Middle Ages. We're not even doing this year. I'm doing this as a precursor to the French-Indian War. So, the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. Maybe I got that. Formally ends the War of Succession. Woohoo! They're done. Yay! So, this formally ends that War of Succession. Now, there's some things that have to be spelled out. In the treaty, you have the territorial restoration. All territories conquered during the war are returned to their previous pre-war owners. What? What was the whole purpose of this war? Nothing. Second thing, Prussian gains. Oh, there we go. Prussia gets to gain something. They retain Silesia. Silesia is establishing it as a significant power in Central Europe. Oh, okay. That's the reason for doing it. Remember, Prussia was trying to take over that land for the last 8 years. So part of this treaty is, fine, you can have it. I mean, seriously, Maria Theresa's already given it to you. But you still continue to battle these other things. Now, the third part, status quo. Maria Theresa retains control of her heritage land, securing her place as the ruler of Austria. Bum, bum, bum. So that's what it is. All that battling, all that war for two things. Two things. One, giving Prussia Silesia. Giving Prussia Silesia. And making it so a woman, which is not the first, a woman can control Austria. Done deal. Francis I was made Holy Roman Emperor. Her husband, but not a female. Okay, you want to talk about sexism? Holy cow, look at that. Okay, there's a lot more to it. But again, we're not going over Middle Eastern history right now. We're talking about the French-Indian War. And again, why did I bring this up? Look at the struggles that were going on between neighboring countries. Okay, so you got all these countries that are battling each other. You have Prussia and Austria. You have Bavaria. You have France and Spain going against Britain. Oh, wait a second. France and Spain going against Britain. What happened during the French and Indian War? That's right. So we're going to go over that next time. Because next time we're going to be talking about the very beginning. But here's the great thing. Okay, so this is about 5 years later that the French-Indian War starts up. It doesn't start, it's not immediate, but it starts up. And it starts up because there's a battling between two countries. France, French-Indian War, against the country that never got their name in the actual war. I don't know why. Britain. So there's going to be these two butting heads. They've been butting in Europe. And now, what about the lands that they have conquered? They're still butting heads. And that does not end at this point. So, stay tuned, because we're going to be talking about a new person in this. A man that you've heard about a lot, all throughout the years of your life. This time, we're going to be talking about none other than George Washington, and how he plays a part, a major part, a huge part of the French and Indian War. Didn't know that, did you? Did you? And did you know that he was British? He was a British officer at the time. Traitor. Actually, no, this is before. And we're going to talk about, while we're talking about the French Indian War, we're going to be talking about why he left and what he did because he was part of that. It all leads up. I mean, everything in history, it's not just a puzzle, especially in non-ancient times. It's less of a puzzle, less of a mystery, and it's linchpins. It's how one thing leads to another. There's a one thing leads to another. Yeah. So great song in the 80s or something like that. But this is where we start talking about the French and Indian War. But I'm not going to start that until Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. I can't wait to tell you. It's going to be a lot of fun. French and Indian War is actually one of the greatest wars fought that most people don't talk about. You don't really learn about it in schools. So when you actually learn this, when you listen to this podcast, you'll actually know more things than most history teachers do in elementary school, middle school, and high school. Because we talk about the things that are not usually talked about in textbooks, but are essential to learn because of what they do. Now, at the same time that we're talking about, let's see, I think we have one more, tomorrow we're going to be talking about the Romans in Africa. We have one more week of African history, but then we're going to go into ancient Israel. Now, again, linchpins. Think of linchpins. This all leads to another, and we're going to show you how that works out together. Not these two, not the American. This is way, way after, but how the ancients all lead up. The way we weave these all together is a story. We weave these all together because we want you to see the linchpins of how one thing leads to another, which leads to another. And with that, I'm going to end it and say goodbye. Remember, one thing leads to another. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.